One time my father was drunk and he drove his car and crashed it. He was arrested and missed the first couple years of my life.
I'm at the point where I'm ready to say he's not my father, but I can't say that because I hope to God he'll find a way to put the bottle down.
Substance abuse has greatly affected my generation. It's causing people to drop out of school and miss out on education. It's taking the lives of others too soon, someone who could have made a difference in this world. It's causing people to waste precious time in their life when instead they could be making something of themselves. It's causing our society to miss out on a lot of potentially great people.
My dad died of a heroin overdose when I was 2 and changed my view on all drugs. Half of my family thinks I'm going to end up like that, and I want to prove them wrong.
When I was younger, my mom used to bring me and my little brother to her friend's house. When I got older, I realized it was a drug house. I'm not sure what my mom was high on, but I know that it was an intense drug.
I was trashed yesterday,
All
so
I
I
remember
didn't
is
come to
going to
school.
the house and watching my
She's
mom
higher
disappear
than
into the
height.
back room. I
Yo,
wouldn't
are
see
we
her for
getting
a few
together this
hours, and then she'd
weekend?
drive us home angry.
Yeah,
and
she's a
crying.
certified
A couple of years
cokehead.
later, my mom passed away.
People see this as a joke. They laugh when they hear drunk party stories. Someone chuckles when we say someone is actually addicted to coke. That's the
When you
worst
grow
part of our
up with your
generation.
parents battling alcoholism, you start to wonder why they love the alcohol more than you. And it makes you think it's not their fault, they're sick. But then you think to yourself, they made the decision to drink when sober. And it's this never-ending cycle you think about in your head, and you try to rationalize and understand why they do what they do. But you never really understand, you just grow tired.
It's a disease. It's definitely a disease, and it needs constant treatment. Relapse is part of, I can't say it's definitely part of the process, but most times relapse is, unfortunately. And unfortunately, his one relapse was the one that got him. I mean, that's just a small indication. That's, as I said, all 4 wheels are off the ground. So he basically had no fear.
I'm like the exception of many. Like there's a lot of, like I said, there's many people that died. And you take all those people and myself in the room, and that's just one person that actually survived and is doing something different. And the only reason is because I'm not doing drugs anymore. And if I was, I'd probably be dead too. I thought I was just having fun. I thought they were all kind of lame, you know, not really understanding what was going on. It's hard to, I know like teenagers is the hardest years because in adolescence because their friends are more important. The friends are like more important to hear from. They're the biggest influence in life. And, you know, I know that the programs are meant to help and really do something, but I think it's the message is like more of a fear message or a, you know, this could happen to you type of message. And I don't think that goes well with adolescents because it's like, well, maybe I'm different. Like, well, you know, what do you know? You're just an adult that always tells me that I'm doing something wrong. And I think like maybe if we were able to offer something that was an alternative that was looked at as, oh, that's pretty cool, like I want to do that, you know, then maybe that might reach people a little bit better.
I guess first of all, I always introduce myself to people these days as, my name's Jim Conklin and I'm a person in long-term recovery. And, you know, what that means for me is that, you know, at a certain point in my life, I had to make a decision about whether using alcohol or other drugs was going to be, you know, what I continued to do, or was I going to seek help and make a change and use the professionals around the community to do that. And I did. And so that because of that choice at that time to seek help, to get help, I've been alcohol and drug free for over 33 years. You know, I did that when I was 23 years old. At any age, at any stage of life, you can get help for an illness. I would do pretty much anything that would alter my mood or mind at that time in my life. Mostly alcohol. It was a very different time. The drugs that were available were a little bit different than they are now. I never have done too much with opiates, and I never did heroin. But again, it's over 30 years ago, and that particular cycle and history of drug use just didn't involve those drugs. If it had, I probably would have used them. You know, and for me, it's just like, you know, I think with addiction, whether it's alcohol or opiates or stimulants or any of the other drugs, you know, I think it's the understanding that, you know, something's different in the brain of the person who has the addiction. And that's the help we need to seek. You know, we're really right in the middle of this crisis as it relates to opiates and heroin, but you know, 20 years ago we were right in the middle of a crisis called crack cocaine. 20 years from now, I don't know what crisis we're going to be in the middle of. So I know it's important to focus on what's going on in the community in terms of a substance use problem, but I don't know if it's important to focus on just one category of drugs. Still, more people are probably dying annually of alcohol-related deaths than any other drug.
This he had no fear, because now looking back, I believe he was the one in control. But going to like fairs or carnivals, he wasn't a ride kid. And now thinking about it with everything that I have learned so far, because I'm taking the credentialed alcohol and substance abuse counselor class, that he most likely had anxiety. Maybe some depression. Because with rides, he didn't want to go on them. And now I see that maybe it's because he wasn't the one in control. You know, he couldn't dictate how fast it went or what it did, or, you know, but those are all things that I see now. Yeah, I didn't see him then.
And I think only because I have the experience of being there, and I think that hopefully people can kind of open their minds up a little bit more, you know, them, the kids themselves, which is difficult, but understand that the stress is actually only increased by doing drugs. It actually causes more stress. It doesn't actually relieve the stress like they think it is. And it actually causes more stress, more problems, anger, all kinds of different emotions that you might not be experiencing without. And it just adds to the problem. You know? And that's really the clearest message to get across.
I would go out, you know, and I would go out at night, and I would say to myself, just have a few drinks and go home. You know, don't close the bars. And ultimately that never happened. And, you know, I would drive drunk. I would come home at 5 o'clock in the morning. You know, there were times when, you know, I would be found asleep in my car, in the driveway or on a street, after being out drinking all night. So, you know, I would do those things. And I think for my parents, my mother would lay awake. My mother went to work. She was a nurse and went to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, you know, and she would lay awake all night. You know, my father would be really angry what I was putting my mom through. You know, she had to go to work and work a full day in a hospital caring for patients, and had to lay awake all night wondering if I was going to be one of those patients the next morning. And I had car crashes before that. And I think I put most of what I put people through was my parents. I have not relapsed since October 3rd, 1982, when I began this journey. I have not relapsed. I have not had a drink or a drug, and this past October was 33 years. Temptation, I don't know. You know, I don't really think of it as temptation. I do have thoughts occasionally. You know, and hopefully I maintain this. Most of the time I treat them as ridiculous thoughts. You know, I think one of them has been recently with all of the press and media around the medical marijuana issue. You know, and I thought, wow, it's going to be legal. You know, maybe I could smoke marijuana someday because, you know, my back does kind of hurt. And I just look at those as, you know, that's what a brain that has the predisposition that I have to addiction, that's how it spins things, you know. And I look at that and I go, well, that's just a ridiculous thought, you know. you'd just be a hot mess if you started messing around with any substances that alter your mind. You know, and I tell people, you know, it's like, I think it's pretty remarkable that in 33 years, you know, I haven't had to have anything, a bad day at work. You know, I have to find another way to deal with a bad day at work. You know, if something horrible happens in my life, I have to find another way to deal with that. You know, I don't have the luxury of going home and smoking a joint or having a few drinks or doing that when, you know, stuff blows up here in the office and, you know, funding's being cut or jobs are on the line or I have to terminate somebody or even to celebrate when we got new funding. I had to hire a whole bunch of new people. You know, it's got to be real. You know, in recovery, you know, life has to be real and you have to find ways to celebrate without being, you know, in that mood-altering, mind-altering place.
Maybe realize, like, I'm only hurting myself when I do that, you know. But it's hard. It is hard. It really is hard, you know. I think that's the question of the century is, like, how do we reach everybody? You know, I know for me, like, I used drugs because I thought it made me cool, you know. Not that it made me cool to use drugs, but the cool people were using drugs. So then, in order to fit in, like, that's how I did. And, you know, what I realized is, like, those cool people are the ones who are dead or in jail right now, you know. And so what would it be like if I wasn't that? Who would I be, you know? And I often think about that, like, who would I have been if I didn't do that? And the reality is I would have been very, very successful, because right now I am very, very successful, and it's because I'm not using drugs, you know? So that's really, like, bottom line is like, what is it? We need to figure it out, like, what is the reason why? Why are you using drugs? Why do you feel like you need to? And then really try and figure out, okay, how do we address that? Because drugs is just a symptom of the problem. It's not really the problem itself. It's the feelings that cause somebody to use drugs. It's the need or whatever it is that's going on that's not being addressed that actually ends up acting out in using drugs. I firmly believe that. So if we're able to address that, it might fix or help to fix a lot of things.
It's like I tell everybody too when I speak now, it's like I didn't see the signs then. Now, everything that I know, I see every single sign. I see him. Some of the stuff was kind of normal for him. Like, he spent time in his room. I didn't pay attention to how much extra time he was spending in his room. Also, long sleeves. You know, I can't necessarily pinpoint whether they were out of place for the season, the long sleeves, but I do know he was wearing hoodies all the time. Changing friends. That should have been a huge light bulb for me, and it wasn't. So I don't know if it's things I just didn't want to see then, or didn't know what I was seeing.
You know, you can become addicted, the dangers of addiction, what can happen, you know, how it can kind of make a mess of your life, and hopefully prevent some people from even taking that step to try and, like, pick up anything for the first time. You know, hopefully, you know, I have a daughter, hopefully this will reach her one time, you know, and say, like, you know, you don't need to go down that route. You know, it's not a fun place, you know.
He must have been going through withdrawal. He was on the phone with a friend of his, and he was saying things like he wanted to hurt himself. So his friend, and I don't even know who the friend was now, was smart enough, got on another phone and dialed 911. And told them what the issue was, what was going on, and then the next thing I know, I'm getting a phone call, and here, the top of the road, my next door neighbor's driveway, because they had the road blocked. It was like a SWAT scene. Like, something you would see in a movie. I felt like I was in a movie. Because I drive up, and there's cop cars, detectives. I mean, they're in full all-out, bulletproof vests, whole 9 yards, because he was threatening to hurt himself. So I had spoken to the one detective, And he was asking me, are there any guns in the house? Are there this? Are there that? And I'm like, yes, but they're in a gun cabinet. And I actually had the key on me. Because because we were having some issues and I didn't want him to be in the gun cabinet. So I gave the detective the gun cabinet key and I'm like, this is what should be in there. And then in the state of mind I was in, I couldn't be here. I couldn't be here to watch, you know? And they told me too, like, if he calls you, don't answer the phone. Me personally, don't talk to him. It's okay. So I actually had gone back to work. Now, mind you, this went across the Orange County scanner. So certain coworkers of mine, they have a scanner, and they heard it all. By the time I got back to work, I had gotten a phone call that they had talked Ben out. So of course I had to come back here to verify what was here, and that's when the detectives, they go through his stuff. And that's when they found the paraphernalia for heroin use. And I was shocked, stunned, numb, more or less. Because my mind didn't go there. You know, you just don't fathom it. So, and then turns out, I was thinking of, because he had said he had a gun or whatever, that I'm thinking of everything that's in the gun cabinet. Never thinking of that one right there. That has been hanging on that beam for 40 years. It's a black powder. There is one side loaded, but without a flint or, it's not gonna work. I never thought of that gun. And that's what he had laying on his bed.
Don't do drugs. Drugs are bad. I would tell myself, basically that, that if I knew what I know now, I would know that it was dangerous for me to use those substances. There's some family history of alcoholism and stuff, and maybe, I don't even know if I knew about that as a kid. I know about it now. But, I would really say, probably like any parent would say to any young person about their family medical history, If you have a family history of diabetes or breast cancer or heart disease or something like that, I would take the precautions of, knowing that I'm at risk, hopefully to make different choices.
He was palling with this one kid, and his grandparents had left for vacation, but before they left for vacation, they changed the door locks. Because previously Ben had a key because he was allowed to go there. Well, when he got there and couldn't open the door, he smashed the kitchen door window. They broke in. They stole TV, they stole power tools, all to run to the pawn shop. So then we had him arrested, and he's sat in jail, and my in-laws happen to know, they lived here their whole lives, so they know the judge, both judges. And the judge had set the bail at such a high amount. I walked into Orange County Jail, I sat down across from Ben, and I said, "You're going to sit here." I said, "Because I'm not putting my house on the line for you." It was that simple. As much as it broke my heart, I couldn't bail him out. At that point, something else needed to be done. And he spent, from July to September in Orange County Jail. And then he was state mandated to an inpatient rehab facility through the drug court system. And my questions for the person were, okay, how long's the program? Where's he going? Because I didn't want him here. I didn't want him to have still easy access to whoever was still here. And they're like, oh, he's going to Albany. I'm like, oh, good, that's 2 hours from home. We're good. I'm like, how long's the program? 9 to 12 months. I said, awesome. Because 28 days is not enough.
And, you know, and even looking back at it, it's not like every single moment was a horrific nightmare. You know, there was a gentleman when I first began to look at getting clean and sober, there was a gentleman that I sat down with before I went to counseling, before I went to treatment, before anything happened. You know, my entree into recovery was a car crash. I went through the windshield of a car in a serious car crash. I had 28 stitches in my face and went and talked to somebody about, I think this might be a problem kind of thing. I wasn't sure if it was a serious problem yet, but I definitely, you know, and it hadn't been my first car crash. So I went to talk to this guy, and the one line that he said to me that made a huge difference was, you may not get in trouble every time you drink, but every time you get in trouble, I bet you've been drinking. You know, and that was the issue with me. You know, and a lot of days were uneventful and nothing horrible happened, and there was no bad behavior on my part, and I went to work and I had a job. I had a responsible job at the time. But he was right. You know, when bad things did happen, there was always alcohol or another drug involved, and that's what I had to take a look at that point.
I'm a better person today, and I think the positive is that I've realized like my mistakes, and I've also gained like now real good friends. Like I said before, I gained full custody of my daughter. You know, after a year of being in treatment, I came home and gained full custody of my daughter. I raised her until she was 3 or 4 years old, and then I met my wife, and I'm married now. You know, like I said, I bought a car, bought a house, I got my bachelor's degree, I'm in school now, getting my master's degree. I'm doing like all the things that I should have done before, but you know what, I think now, like because of what I've been through, like I know I can get through anything. It's nice to know what I'm thinking and actually really care about life. And you know, I had, my daughter was born in April of that year that I got arrested. And I remember like thinking, you know, like, what kind of father am I going to be if I'm not even there, you know? And so like that was really, when I thought about that, I was like, you know what, I really need to get my stuff together.
All of a sudden, you know, I go to bed, middle of the night sometime, I wake up, I notice his door's closed, but the light's on. And I didn't pay any attention because that wasn't, again, uncommon for him. Because he would have a tendency to stay up all night. Okay. Again, a few hours later, I roll over, the light's still on. Still, I don't pay any attention. Finally at 7, when I get up, the light is still on in his room. So I swung the door open, and I started to talk to him, and I have to say, this is an image that I am stuck with forever. He was sitting on the edge of his bed with his face on his nightstand. I thought he fell asleep. Until I walked over, and that's when I saw the needle on his arm. So then, of course, I panic. You know, mom mode sets in. I did have enough sense, though, to immediately run to my room and grab the phone and dial 911. Then run back into his room and proceed to rattle off my address without any hesitation. You know, like there was no, it was like instinct. And all I kept saying to the operator was, he's so cold. And then she's telling me to do CPR, which again is kind of instinct. You know, got him on the floor. And then the hard part was I did CPR for a half an hour before the ambulance showed up. And I knew in the back of my mind, but you still have to try. So that's what I'm stuck with every day. And I do see a therapist every 2 weeks. I was going every week, and I've dropped it down to every other week. And she tells me, you know, you have to try to replace that image with a happy image. But it's hard. It's really hard. It's hard, yeah. When you go from this, you know, to having to try to save your kid's life. And all the while in the back of your head knowing it was really too late. And then of course, you do the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. You know, like, when I rolled over and first saw his light on, why didn't I get up? Maybe at that point, I would have been soon enough to save him. But, like I said, it wasn't uncommon for his light to be on. Yeah, this is what they leave behind. I have pictures, memories. It's an out of order death. And like at his graveside, I was pulling weeds one day, and I started yelling at him because I was like, "Who's gonna do this for me now?" And I'm like, "You were supposed to," because he was my only child. I don't have anybody else.
I'm trying to get out of the habit of actually using the word relapse. You know, I'm really kind of looking at it for folks that do not maintain the recovery. I'm just kind of looking at it as a lapse in recovery, not a relapse of the disease. You know, and you can get right back into recovery. You know, and because I haven't had a lapse in my recovery, doesn't mean I have any better recovery than someone who has had a lapse in their recovery. You know.
So it's not an inevitable part.
I don't think it's inevitable. I mean, it wasn't for me, but I don't look down on anyone that does have a lapse in their recovery. I mean, it happens. You know, hopefully, we can have and build, you know, and through projects like this, you know, build more of an understanding that, you know, because people get very upset, and I just was talking to one of our elected officials on a trip to Albany last week, you know, and his comment was, "But the relapse rate is so high," and I said, "But the relapse rate is actually higher for heart disease and asthma than it is for substance use disorder." And he just kind of looked at me, you know. It's like, and most people don't know that, you know. There are other diseases that have a much higher relapse rate than substance use disorder.
And the bad choice is what got him. So, in trying to keep other kids from making that same bad choice is my goal. I don't have all the answers. I will never have all the answers. Even like now, there's questions I wish I could ask him. I wish I had asked him. Like, why did it start? Where did it start? You know, that kind of thing. And now they're questions I'll never have answers to. And that's something I have to live with. So, as I said, if I can If I can make a difference to one, then I'm happy. I hope to make a difference to a lot more, but I'll start with one.